Welcome back to the left versus the right. My guest today is someone who doesn't need any introduction anywhere, except maybe in Qatar, where I was last week, but I'm sure they've heard of him as well. And right now, Curtis Sliwa has three distinctions. Number one, he is the Republican candidate for mayor. Number two, he is the first candidate to receive his party's nomination. And number three, he's the only candidate that's ever done talk radio and talk TV with David Paterson. So with these incredible distinctions that you have, Curtis, how's the campaign going?
Well, number four, with all the candidates talking about running on independent lines, I was the first to file for an independent line, so I'll be the first independent line you see in addition to the Republican line. Protect animals line, no kill shelters, and obviously to go after abusers of animals. So that's the first time that's ever been done.
So your name will come first when the independent line comes up.
Correct. You see, first to file is first there. I'm sure somebody will challenge the signatures and this arcane method, but we're pretty much airtight. But Cuomo has filed an independent line. Eric Adams, the mayor, has two. Jim Walden has one. And there's a whole slew of others who are attempting to get certified as independent candidates for mayor.
And complicate the situation even more than it has ever needed to be. But I think it's important for you to have, particularly the independent line that you do have, because that's an area that, candidates run and nobody ever really talks about it. So it'll give you the option of, publicizing what you'd like to do in that area, particularly with the cruelty to animals that continues here in New York City. So that I think is a justifiable line. Some of the others I think are strategic, and I don't know how they're going to influence the outcome. Now,
well, probably more important for me as a Republican is there are a lot of people who would never vote for a Republican, just will never, never, never. Now, if you give them an alternative of an independent line, they'll tell you, I can vote for you on that. But more so than probably other areas in New York City, being a Republican alone, or even like a Republican conservative, you pretty much box yourself in. Now, being a Republican, I'm not the conservative nominee. I wasn't the last time. I'm not conservative. But having a line you could vote on me, in which you could say to your parents when you go visit them at the grave sites, I did not vote for a Republican. I voted for Curtis Sliwa on the Protect the Animals line, and you will have eternal salvation.
And you can maintain your status in your family and with your friends and
exactly
that kind of thing. So to that end, there was an article, I guess yesterday, that I saw where all the candidates were assessing whether or not Andrew Cuomo wants to be mayor or does he want to do something else. Now, if these candidates were really working that hard, I don't know that they would even address this issue, but they did talk about it. So since we're sitting here, we've got a little time to spare. I'm wondering what do you think of that candidacy, and what do you think that the former governor, former attorney general, what his actual end game is?
It's really hard to know because it's clear he wanted to get back in the game. And when he saw that Eric Adams was faltering, he jumped right in.
Right.
But you know this better than anybody, having spent a good deal of your life in politics. Your dad, Basil Paterson, Secretary of State, had run for elective office. Your friend today is your enemy tomorrow. I remember on a stage in Brooklyn when I was running against Eric Adams, Cuomo had already fallen. He had fled Albany fearing impeachment.
Right.
And Eric Adams had him on the stage with him. They embraced. A lot of people thought, wow, that's a very bold thing to do.
Oh, that, yeah, because it was 2001.
Yes.
He resigned on August 10th, 2001, and it took effect on the 25th. And so this could only be 3 or 4 weeks after that whole situation.
Right, but Cuomo then went on to consistently say, we must support Eric Adams for mayor because if he does well, the city does well. And I knew the moment I saw him at Junior's in a very public meeting with Frank Sedio the former chairman of the Brooklyn Democratic Party, sitting down, having a discussion. This is early in the process. I said, uh-oh, the wheels are coming off the Adams reelection team because Frank Sedillo, Frank Carone, the Brooklyn Democratic Party was always strongly in support of Eric Adams. And that, to me, was the signal that Cuomo would make the leap, not to run for governor, which everybody thought, but to run for mayor. The problem with Cuomo is, and you've experienced Cuomo for many, many years, and I've experienced Cuomo, he doesn't like to be in crowds, public crowds. He likes to control everything. So when he is in a gathering, it's normally in a hall. People have to be vetted before they come in. Everything is, he never did town hall meetings when he was governor, which has almost become like almost required if you're a governor. When you were a mayor, whether you were a bad mayor or a good mayor, you had to be out there with the people. He never struck me as a people kind of guy, which is part of the requirement of being mayor of the city of New York. You got to be out and about, sometimes in crowds that are not going to be all that friendly to you.
So I had lunch with him, I don't know, it was about 4 or 5 months ago. And this is when he was really starting to let, close friends and associates know that he wanted to run for mayor. And I said to him, Andrew, you might want to run for mayor, but in my opinion, you shouldn't do that. You should wait and run for governor, against whoever's running at the time. And he said, why would I do that? I said, well, you see, Andrew, when you are mayor, and think about the mayors, they lived with the media. The media lives right outside Gracie Mansion. They always know where the mayor is. When the mayor doesn't tell them where they're going, they follow him. So the mayor is probably the most watched person in the city while they're mayor. But in Albany, half the people that live there don't even know where the governor lives. They don't know where the governor lives, but they don't know when he or she goes there, when he or she leaves. And if you don't want to be bothered, and you're governor, and I am testifying to this, I was one of them. You just go to some place because it's not like New York City. It's not like, you go to a quiet restaurant in Brooklyn and bing, one person in the restaurant knows who you are and they report it. And so, it can happen to a governor, but being governor affords you a lot more protection in the like that you just described.
Yes.
Because I don't see him as a people person. Even when I've seen him places socially, all we talk about is politics. He's not one of those guys who would have cared one way or the other whether the Knicks, won on Thursday night, and now the series comes back to the Garden. I'm sorry, it's the other way around. They won in the Garden Thursday night, and now the series moves. He doesn't do that. That's not his thing.
Well, notice, Governor Paterson, on that note, I actually grew up and have been a Knicks fan. I've not been tweeting about it or showing up with the crowds out at Madison Square Garden. But everyone running for mayor now thinks that's the most. I got to be seen in the crowd. I got to be wearing my Brunson throwback jersey. I got to be, go Knicks, go, go. That's the greatest thing that ever happened for the city. Eric Adams, who knew nothing about the Knicks. Likewise, he was at the game, the last game that they won. And I'm saying to myself, yeah, they're using the John Lindsay route. They're hoping that a team will win a championship. Obviously, with the Knicks, a little too early.
The Mets re-elected John Lindsay.
Yes, who knew nothing about sports and admitted it. And all of a sudden, he was an independent candidate on the liberal line given to him by Alex Rose and Dubinsky, who had been part of the American Labor Party.
And then he had the new Democratic coalition, which he set up as an independent line itself.
Right. And meantime, the Republicans rejected him for a second term. They elected the patrician John Markey, state senator from Staten Island. And then the guy I loved, Mario Procaccino, son of a shoemaker. He used Bertolli olive oil in his hair, and he coined the phrase.
Limousine liberal.
That's right.
Yes.
That's when he would refer to John Lindsay. And he was like one of the last of the conservative Democrats, along with Mario Biaggi. He said, somebody breaks into my house, I shoot him right there. You can then drag him out. Now, when is the last time you heard a Democrat talk like that?
Exactly. Now, by the way, on the subject just because it came up. I wasn't even thinking about it. I'd like you and the audience to know that my nephew, whose name is Basil A. Paterson, like his grandfather, finished third in a contest on Memorial Day that was held in Central Park to determine who looks the most like the New York Knicks point guard, whose name is escaping me. Anyway, him. Because he has a very distinct look, the way he wears his hair.
You mean Brunson?
Brunson, Jalen Brunson.
He has braids.
Yes. And Basil Paterson, my nephew, finished third.
Whoa.
And this guy who I mean, to me, he looked exactly like Jalen Brunson won. And the difference between him and my nephew was he had his hair exactly the way Jalen Brunson does. So that's for those of you sports fans.
As the former governor, you couldn't put the fix into that contest, no?
No, I couldn't do anything about it.
Well, let me tell you.
They wouldn't listen to me.
As I have oftentimes told audiences, I'm 71. I'm the oldest guy running for mayor. But I played stickball against your father, Basil Paterson, in Harlem.
I remember this.
And your mother informed you when I was telling you in your apartment that, oh, yeah, I played against your father. Your mother said, oh, yeah, Curtis did. He's a good stickball player.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, I was commissioner of stickball for 8 years of Rudy Giuliani, 4 for Michael Bloomberg, who didn't know anything about stickball whatsoever. But he figured he would just keep me around. No benefits, no MTA swipe card, no nothing. Just go out, make sure everybody has a good time playing the old traditional street game of all of New York City, stickball.
And apparently my father's in the Stickball Hall of Fame or something.
Yes. Let me tell you what your father was able to do. This is a skill. He was able to put spin on the ball. See, if you hit the ball in the air, like your favorite, Peter Alonso hits these sky shots. If it don't go over the wall, it's easy to catch.
They're going to get caught.
But when you are a stickball player extraordinaire, you hit line drives with spin on it. So that even if it bounces, if nobody can catch it on the fly, it then bounces backwards instead of forwards. And you end up scurrying around trying to get it as it goes under a car. You're able to circle the bases. Your dad was expert, like somebody shooting pool who can put spin on the cue ball and get it to knock maybe 3 balls into different pockets. That's how skilled your father was playing stickball.
Yeah, I'd only seen him play in those reunions, but they, talked about his prowess on the stickball court.
Hey, I'm not even in the Stickball Hall of Fame, and I was the commissioner of stickball for 12 years.
So again, as the executive, you still weren't able to, tweak the process and put yourself in the Hall of Fame.
But it is interesting how everyone claimed, now you're a sports aficionado. I'm a sports aficionado. But politicians, for some reason, whenever there are championship or playoff games going on, they put their 2 cents in, their 2 cents plain. And then when you have a conversation with them about, you're a fan, who are your favorite players and what game was really turned you on to the game, they look at you vapidly like, campaign manager, bail me out of here. I would just prefer shut up, like Adams would put on a hat, half New York Yankee, half New York Met. No. If you're a real baseball fan or basketball fan, you're either allied to one team or another team, and you don't necessarily like the other team.
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm just rooting for New York. I'm glad the Mets are here and the Yankees. I think it's a great game. It's not a great game. You're not telling the truth. Either you're with one or the other, or you shouldn't even be at the game at all.
Well, Rudy Giuliani was very in your face. I'm a Yankee fan through and through.
And I respected that. He was one of the first elected officials who brought his real personality to his public office that didn't play that game. Now, earlier in the week, we lost the legendary Charlie Rangel. And Charlie Rangel and David Dinkins, also who we've lost, they used to get dressed up on the day of the Super Bowl. They would get the addresses of people who were having Super Bowl parties, and they would come into the parties. Sometimes 3rd and 2, 1 minute to go in the game, and the team with the ball is down by 3 points. and they would come in and start shaking hands and that kind of thing. And then sometimes they'd actually turn the game down and let them talk, which just and as you know, with me, if I get close enough, I can sort of see the game on television, but I can always hear the game. Now I can't do either because of them.
Wow.
And
I know that your dad was one of those four horsemen of Harlem, along
yes.
with Percy Sutton of Inner City Broadcasting, who also ran for mayor, but lost the Democratic primary. Obviously, David Dinkins and Charlie Rangel. Now, I have a great Charlie Rangel story.
But before you get to that,
yes,
I just want to tell you, they come in and whoever the host of the party is, or one of them speaking, and I went over to the host and said, tell these two, I'll give them each $1,000 if they can name even one of the teams that's in the game. And the guy wouldn't do it because he knew they didn't know.
That is so true. That is so true. But to Charlie Rangel's credit, as most people know, on June 19th of 1992, I was shot in the back of the cab on the orders of John Gotti Sr. to John Gotti Jr. and the Gambino crime family while coming to WABC to do the morning show, Angels in the Morning, with my wife, Lisa, at the time. Charlie Rangel, congressman, who I didn't often agree with, put up a reward of $10,000, the first to put up the reward. Months later, after a second operation, he invited me up to his state office, right there, Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard in the State Building.
Right.
And he sat down and he goes, how you doing? And I explained all the problems I was having in recovery. And he goes, I got shot in the Korean War. When we were up in North Korea, it was freezing cold. It was sub-zero weather. I had gotten hit with shrapnel, bullet fragments. And he described what an ordeal it was for him to recover, because back then they didn't have the medical prowess that they have today. It was MASH. It was like the time of that series MASH. And what a brave guy he was with all those veterans who fought in weather that was sub-freezing, zero temperatures against wave after wave of red Chinese kamikaze guys who just knew that they were going to be get killed and cut down with machine gun fire. So I always admired him for that.
Well, he would go out of his neighborhood, on occasions where he just had some simpatico with something that was happening to someone else. He had a very good relationship with Congressman Peter King. When I heard about Charlie, which was on Memorial Day, I called Congressman King because I knew he would want to hear it from me before he heard it on the news or something like that. And he was obviously very upset about that. But back to the issues here in the city, what is interesting is that one of the candidates who we've been talking about, Andrew Cuomo, has a plan to raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour. And Zoran Mondani, another candidate, he would like to raise the minimum wage to $30 an hour. Now, Curtis, we're going to give you a couple of minutes to think about this. If you become mayor, remember they had a TV show called Can You Top This?
Yes.
Are you going to try to top this, or do you have a plan that might be a little more reasonable than what we've already heard? You all are listening to The Left versus the Right. I'm David Paterson with Curtis Sliwa. He is, right now, I can feel his brain churning to get an opportunity to talk about that. We'll be back right after these brief commercial messages, and you will hear what the Republican candidate feels. We are back with The Left versus the Right. And when we left you just a few moments ago, and I know none of you touched that radio dial to see what was on the other stations. I know you didn't do that because we have technology that registers where you are. And I know all of you are waiting to hear what the Republican candidate for mayor, Curtis Sliwa, who's challenged by a candidate named Andrew Cuomo, who would like to raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour, and Zoran Mondani, a candidate who's tried to raise the minimum wage to $30 an hour. By the way, this is quite a mayoral group of mayoral candidates. When's the last time there were a number of candidates that ran for something and there were two Z's? Because Zelnor Myrie, who knows, maybe he is already to try to raise the minimum wage to $40 an hour.
Exactly.
But
they've done this. They've done this with housing. You know, one will say, "Oh, we're going to build 500,000 units in 15 years." I said, "We won't even be alive then. At least I probably won't."
Or they won't break ground.
Right. A million. But you know, they just first off, I don't think any of them ever managed a retail establishment. Remember, I managed a McDonald's, and you were paying minimum wage at the time. There were young men and young ladies who would come up at the register who couldn't even figure out the change to give. Back then, remember, it wasn't computerized. Now
right.
It's computerized. You give your order in, and they don't even fold the bag. They just sit up there and hold the counter up. Nobody cleans. I had a statement as, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean. I'd like to see some productivity, because all they keep doing is raising the minimum wage, and with robotics right there, momentarily going to take everybody's manual labor jobs. And with an artificial intelligence, the wealthy in the world have said, "Oh, we'll give everybody a survivable income. They won't even have to work." I say, you got to earn it. You keep giving these increases, and you're putting small businesses out of business, which is our problem in New York City. The mom and pop shops are going out of business. They can't hire people. Incredibly
less of those, and they were really the fabric of New York, and it's not there right now.
No, and in fact, just look at all the storefronts, retail storefronts that are closed. A lot of it has to do with shoplifting, in which there's no consequences for committing your crimes. But everybody who's in politics loves to raise things. Yeah, raise this, raise this. Oh, raise the debt in Washington, raise the deficit. Don't worry about it. We'll declare bankruptcy. If you have actually had to manage a retail establishment where a lot of people get their first jobs, that's where they would first get minimum wage, you understand that many of them, they don't even know how to wipe their tuchus, brush their teeth, wash their hands yet, and right away you want to give them the minimum wage. How about a little meritocracy, where you achieve different levels and we start raising your wage based on accomplishments, not like right out of the box. Oh, you can inhale and exhale. Okay, we give you the minimum wage.
Now, what about the issue, if this were even possible to do, of where's the money going to come from? Who is going to give up the money? Now, in Mondani's proposal, he needs $10 billion from the state. Now, I'm just going to say, I used to be governor of the state. If anyone had ever asked me for $10 billion, I would have told them, run against me, beat me, and then give yourself $10 billion. Because it's not going to work. It just hurts the economy, and it starts to benefit certain classes of people more than others. And that is really not a good way to represent people in elective office, particularly in the executive positions.
Oh, there's no doubt. And plus, remember, he believes that people should not have private property. Seize the private property. They have a belief up in Albany that the state should buy all the private property and lease it back to the occupiers. They call them occupiers. Socialism does not work. Communism does not work. Can you imagine? I was before a group of Albanians in Staten Island this past week. They escaped communism of the worst type. A guy named Hoxha believed that America was going to invade them from the Adriatic Sea, and he built pillboxes and followed Mao Zedong in the Little Red Book, not even Stalin and Khrushchev in the old Soviet Union during the Cold War. So they know what it's like to live in an oppressive state with socialism or communism. They come to America. They're the most shocked people in the world, along with other immigrants who have escaped socialism and communism. They say, you really think that's a good system? You really think that can work? Why would you want to give up what you already have here in America? And I think Zoran Mandami is the son of privilege. This is what I would ask him. Nobody seems to ask him in this, David Paterson. You and your family grew up in Uganda as an Indian family, because Indians, along with Lebanese, Jews, and Chinese, became merchants throughout the world. They traveled the world. They became the merchant class. Idi Amin at that time, who liked to feed his enemies to the crocodiles, exiled all the Indian families, gave them 90 days. They had to leave or that's it. He'd feed them to the crocodiles.
That's sounding vaguely familiar.
Yes, they left. And then there was the hostage rescue made famous by the movies and the documentaries Entebbe, in which, remember, the Palestinian terrorists had taken a plane full of Israelis and others.
And that was the forerunner of the movie The Raid on Entebbe.
That's right. And so they brought it to Uganda, and there was Idi Amin with his troops, and there was some Libyan troops there from Muammar Gaddafi. They held the hostages that were Israeli Jews. Everyone else they released. And then the IDF came in. That's where Bibi's older brother, died in freeing the hostages. Would you have agreed that that was appropriate for Israel to send in their IDF to rescue their hostages in the very country that had kicked you and your family out and would have fed you to the crocodiles if you hadn't left in 90 days? Nobody seems to connect the dots with this guy because he's not really a student of history. He's a student of the moment, and his whole concept in running is free buses, free subway, don't pay rent. Everything's free. Meantime, you say, well, who's going to pay for it? You know, not everybody has a wealthy mother and father like you in which you can live on a blind trust.
Well, Curtis, I will say one thing that you've done for him. You just gave him some free advertising because I don't know that anyone else has really talked about him too much in the campaign.
Oh, but let me tell you, David, I'm out in the streets because you know that's where I do best. He's got troops. He's got ideologues. And with ranked choice voting that nobody understands except for Frank Morano and Curtis Sliwa, they've never taken the time to understand why it was put into place. If the Democrats remained resolute and disciplined, and so far, David, unlike 2021, they are, if they actually get their supporters to eliminate Cuomo from ranked choice, they can take this leader. There's no doubt Cuomo is leading. He'll lead in the first, maybe second, third round of the vote count. But he can drop precipitously if nobody is putting him as second. That's why he needed Eric Adams in the primary, because in Eric Adams' vote, it probably would have put Andrew Cuomo second. Adrienne Adams has just qualified. She's got matching funds. And let me tell you something, David Paterson, this is why Zohran Mamdani urged his followers to make sure Adrienne Adams qualifies. Cuomo has to do two debates.
To stack the back of the ranked choice.
Right.
So it doesn't matter who wins the first round, as long as they don't get the majority. As the rounds continue, and that happened to Mayor Adams himself,
yes,
who was way ahead. Well, not way ahead, but significantly ahead. And in the end, he won by less than 100,000 votes, right?
That's right. Now, if only they had a New York Times
less than 10,000 votes he won.
Right, that was Kathy Garcia.
Yeah.
But let me explain the strategy. You're hearing it first. Why would one candidate, Zohran Mamdani, urge his followers to donate to Adrienne Adams so she could qualify for matching funds, which she did, $2.2 million. It's coming right on time. So she can get on the debate stage. Watch everybody move back, and Adrienne Adams becomes Elizabeth Warren versus Michael Bloomberg. Remember how all the Democrats stepped back, including Bernie Sanders, and she eviscerated Bloomberg the first time.
Oh, my God, I couldn't believe it. And, you know, for all the times I saw the mayor go off on people. I mean, I was in a restaurant with him one time, and the waitress said, "What would you have?" And I said, I'll have the soup. And she said, "What did you say?" And he screamed, "He said the soup." I'm like, hey, Mike, no
soup for you, Mike.
People are watching us here.
But he got destroyed. And what they're going to do is, because I was with Adrienne Adams and some of the others, with the families of those who had died because of Cuomo's executive order. Adrienne Adams gave the most emotional address. Her father, she equates her father as having died as a result of that executive order. What is Cuomo going to say to Adrienne Adams, black woman with cred, when she blames him for the death of her father, and then she brings up sexual harassment of the people who had worked for him, including that state trooper that he doesn't want to talk about, that we're paying money for. $63 million so far, and the bill keeps going up because he had qualified immunity to defend him when he was governor. I think he's going to have a tough time dealing with Adrienne Adams, which will benefit all the other candidates on this stage.
That's very interesting. one of her workers called and asked me about the qualified immunity because the New York taxpayers apparently have paid over $60 million defending him from one action against the other. And when I applied for it years ago, they didn't give it to me over Yankees tickets of $60,000, which I was forced to pay.
Yeah, meantime, Ed Rendell, who was the governor of Pennsylvania at the time, supporting the Philadelphia Phillies against the Yankees in the World Series, he got his free tickets, and he didn't do nothing to him.
That's right.
They went after you.
I saw him there.
I think I know who's responsible for that.
We'll have to talk about that.
It's your show, so I'm not going to cloud the air, but I happen to know who was calling the New York Post and feeding them that wrong information.
It's interesting that the information is now being fed against this person.
Yes.
For a lot of what they've done.
Of course.
But moving on to,
let's say the leader of the Democratic primary. I gave it.
So in terms of just the fabric of the city and you are out, more than the other candidates, that nobody disputes that. How do you see your course to victory? We talked about it in terms of there being perhaps 3 or 4 candidates, maybe the one of the unions will create a line and put it up for one of the candidates in the general election. What's your course that you think, if you follow it, you will be in City Hall on January 1st, 2026?
There are going to be five main candidates in the general election. Remember, the last time, 2021, the typical 2 candidates, Republican, Democrat.
There's going to be 5 this year?
Well, let me explain.
Let me explain. Now that I know that, maybe I'll run.
Okay.
All right.
Well, you had the chance.
Yes.
Remember, I was goading you into running.
I know.
Just as I goaded Eric Adams, come in the Republican primary, Eric, come on. He wouldn't do it. But you'll have Andrew Cuomo, or Andy Cuomo, as I like to call him, probably battered and bruised the Democratic primary winner. Fresh from a really good performance, Zorhan, the magnificent Mandami, will get Working Families Party nod because they hate Cuomo, and rightfully so. He tried to destroy them. Then you're going to have Eric Adams. He's running on 2 independent lines. A guy named Jim Walden, who will be on an independent line. And Curtis Sliwa, who's on 2 lines. I am the Republican unchallenged candidate. Nobody ran against me in the primary. And I have a second line, Protect the Animals line. Now, even Team Cuomo said in newspaper reports, beware of Curtis Sliwa. He starts out with about 30%. Because remember, that's what Trump got, Zeldin got, I got, all in that 30% range.
That zone right there. So
if he gets 30%, and there are 4 others, all of them who are actual Democrats with different names this time, he could win with 35% of the vote. So beware of Sliwa. And my whole campaign is in the outer boroughs, Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, which all the candidates are avoiding. I'm the only candidate who says I will repeal the city of yes. No more shelters. We got to manage the ones we have. No more migrant shelters and these lithium-ion battery warehouses that are popping up in all the outer boroughs. Not Manhattan, which uses most of the electricity, but in the outer boroughs. I'm the only one who's opposed to that. And this has a lot of people in the outer boroughs angry, and I don't think the candidates quite understand that because they never seem to leave Manhattan. They never seem to leave Manhattan, or they go into safe environs in the borough that they represent if they're elected officials, which is not a good litmus test of how people in the other parts of the borough are going to.
No, because if you're going to do that, you might as well run for the office that you hold now.
Exactly.
In your own district.
If you're Zorhan Mandami and you're hanging out in Astoria, what good does that do? These are the people that elected you, that the People's Republic of Astoria. You got to go in a middle village in Glendale and Maspeth and Ridgewood and Howard Beach and Broad Channel and the Rockaways and Whitestone and Flushing and College Point. He's never going to go there.
And by the time they get to all of those places, if they can even remember the ones that you just cited, it's one appearance, and then, you say you've checked the box, and then you go someplace else.
So that's my pathway to victory, Governor David Paterson.
Well, I see that if there's consistent appearances and that type of discussion, somebody could build up a little head of steam. And in a race with 5 candidates, so if you have a race of 5 candidates, everything being equal, everybody gets 20%. Even your 30% could theoretically win.
Yes. Oh, just remember the last time, and it involved Mario Cuomo, and it involved Ed Koch, and it involved the heir to the ex-lax fortune, State Senator Roy Goodman, Republican, Upper East Side, a liberal Republican, and a talk show host named Barry Farber.
Yes.
Who had run before against Bella Abzug for her congressional seat. So think about that. That was 4, and they had great debates. Gabe Pressman was one of the hosts. They had a lot of debates. This time, there will only be 2 debates because of the Campaign Financial Board requirements. I'm going to suggest that we do a debate in every borough because each borough is different and has unique interests and needs.
And each borough has the right to raise what they consider to be the important issues in their borough and let the whole city hear about it for once in a while. Whereas a Manhattan-based campaign, you kind of know what the Manhattan
well, I'm going to
issues
suggest you be the moderator because you'll stack the deck against me there.
I probably will.
Of course you will. You got to keep your cred with the Dems. You're considered a patriarch of the Democratic Party in New York State.
It's interesting. A Democratic Party leader who doesn't think that I have stuck to the party line called me up one night right after I'm leaving Cats at night, and he says, "When are you changing your registration to Republican?" And I'd been looking for this guy for a while, and I said to him, it's taken me 6 months to get a return call from you. If that's what it took, I'm doing it tomorrow. Well, folks, we'll be back with a final installment of The Left versus the Right, unless Curtis wants to stay more, and we'll just sit here and talk until 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. But he's got to get back to the campaign trail. So let's hear a few commercial messages and announcements from the station, and we'll be back. We're back. I know you thought about changing the dial, but you knew you couldn't do it. You knew that you are addicted to this program. And even when I'm not here, I want to thank my co-host this week, Curtis Sliwa, for covering for me while I was somewhere in the East and somewhere where I have not recovered from since I got back. And but this issue in terms of the city's issues and where people line up in this election probably will be as interesting for a student of government going back to 1977, the race that you cited, because that was a really interesting race at that particular time. And it will be just quite interesting to see how it comes out. I'm wondering that when this whole situation, really gets started, will be after these primaries are held. Then we'll kind of know who the candidates really are, and at that point, there's usually a whole thing about who's going to debate and who doesn't debate, and people can be 3 points ahead in the polls and not debate, which just kills me. You just see that happen. In fact, there's a candidate in Staten Island that didn't debate recently, thinking that they didn't need to because they knew a lot of people in the party, and somebody we know beat them.
Yep.
And beat them substantially.
Well, in this case, they have to debate because they've accepted matching funds.
Exactly.
So they're not like a Bloomberg who basically said, I don't need anybody's money. I'm just going to buy the mayoralty. And hey, if you're watching and listening, Mike Bloomberg, you spent $1 million, right? No, $100 million to beat Billy Thompson halfway through the night. Billy Thompson with no money, who
was ahead of him,
destroyed by the muckraking machine of Bloomberg, was ahead by 12 midnight. And Bloomberg looked around and said, who is doing my ballot integrity? And slowly he creeped to victory. It just shows you. You can have all the money in the world. It does not guarantee victory.
There are a lot of ways that the former controller, William Thompson, could have won that race. And I just felt he didn't have the, I guess, intestinal fortitude to really go after Bloomberg, because remember, this was Bloomberg's third race.
Right.
And
he said, I'm Mr. Term Limits, but you know what? I want another 4 years.
Yeah, and then he gives the city council another 4 years.
Right.
And they gave him whatever they wanted,
right.
which is really something. And I just, supporting Billy, I just didn't think that he got in Bloomberg. Like, you work with people, and, I worked with Governor Pataki, and we didn't agree a lot. But you do form a little bit of a friendship. And it was a situation where I had a friend who was terminally ill, and I asked Pataki to leave him on the state payroll. And he was there for a couple of months. And then, the people under you, those are the ones who always kill you. One of the Senate Republicans said that they didn't get a job for one of their people. So they fired this friend of mine. And then when I tried to contact Pataki, they knew I was going to try to contact him. They're blocking the calls and he doesn't call back. So I went to an event where he was and I asked to speak to him. And I said, listen, I thought you said you would keep this guy. He said, I didn't know they got rid of this guy. He says, you tell your friend to come back in 2 days. And I thought to myself, boy, I'm glad I'm not one of those people who fired him, because Pataki looked really upset. So you do form a little bit of an allegiance because you're leaders. But Bill as the controller and Bloomberg as mayor, they got along very well, but they got along too well. And I thought that was why I thought the votes were there for Bloomberg to go down. Think about it, in a Democratic election, basically, Bloomberg barely won that race.
Yeah, barely, with $100 million. Now, the other interesting thing is the two guys who are like two scorpions in a brandy glass, Rudy and Pataki, especially after Rudy jumped ship and endorsed Mario Cuomo against Pataki, which actually served to Pataki's benefit, because then Rudy went all upstate with John Katzmatidis' plane. He went to all the small towns. He did press conferences at the airports, and Republicans who were buried in nearby grave sites came out with pitchforks and basically forced him to fly back to New York City. So what was apparently, according to the Daily News, a 20-point lead for Mario Cuomo against a person that nobody knew, George Pataki, suddenly shrunk because of the hate that Rudy would come up in the areas that the Republicans were strong and try to campaign. I'm the Republican endorsing Mario Cuomo. They forced him out, and we ended up benefiting because we ended up with George Pataki, who turned out to be a great governor for 12 years.
I distinctly remember that 3 or 4 days before the general election, New York 1 had Cuomo up by 15 points.
Yep.
And he was the incumbent. Who thought he would lose? I was shocked. I don't always get who's going to win right, but I couldn't believe not only did Pataki beat Cuomo, but he beat him by about 5 points. It was not even that close, and it's funny because the chicanery that candidates will engage in to try to beat each other are often not thought through, and that idea to send Rudy upstate. They could send him to Republican areas around the city and maybe in Long Island, but not upstate, because they don't play up there.
Oh,
you're a Republican.
That points out that if everybody's concerned about the next year's gubernatorial race and Republicans beating the incumbent Hochul, Pataki got about 33% of the city vote. So if I get 35% of the vote in the city as a Republican, and whoever is chosen by the Republicans, whether it's Bruce Blakeman, whether it's Congressman Lawler, or now Stefanik, who's on fire from upstate, whoever is chosen or battles one another in a primary, if they get 32 to 33% in New York City, your next governor of the state of New York is going to be a
Republican again.
And they all talk about that, and they totally forget that the way you would get that is for Curtis Sliwa to do so well like he did the last time, and then Zeldin did better, and Trump did better. That's how you build momentum, which is what we have now in New York City.
And it just never seemed back in the 80s that the reign of the executive branch would switch from Democrat to Republican, because the demographics of the state had shifted largely from Republican to Democrat. But in 1994, like you point out, George Pataki upset the sitting governor Mario Cuomo.
Could have been president.
And I never understood why Cuomo ran for a fourth term anyway. I just never understood why he did it. I'm not criticizing him. I just never understood.
Well, it's the curse of the four terms. Koch, too. He lost to Dinkins.
Lost in fourth
They
term.
don't seem to understand that people, even some of your supporters, get a little tired of you when you're going for a fourth term. That means you already dealt with them for 12 years. That's a long time.
And what you could do instead is get out, go get some job where you're still in position to have political influence and be sort of, like the advisor to other people. And because of your reputation and your record, you can still reach into government and talk to people about something you think needs to be done. But that's a mistake that I've seen made over and over again.
Well, the other mistake, Governor David Paterson, is everybody thinks once you're mayor, you're going to be running for president. It's the dead-end job.
It is.
You're mayor, and you're going nowhere else politically because you develop more haters than lovers out there. Look at Rudy. He was the mayor of America after 9/11. He ran for president on the Republican line. He was so far ahead of the polls, he didn't even make it through the Florida primary, and then he had to cash in his chips and bow out.
That's what happened to President Giuliani. That's what happened to President Bloomberg. That's what happened to President de Blasio.
Oh, please. We were actually better off. 4 months he was away. The city actually ran better without him.
Without him, and then and the interesting thing about that is not only has no one who ever served as mayor become president, but no one who ever served as mayor ever went anyplace else.
No, look at de Blasio. He couldn't even win that open seat for Congress in Park Slope, that brand new created seat. There were like 10 candidates. De Blasio's name was in it. Halfway through, he realized, I'm going to finish last.
And he got out.
So I'm opting out.
Yeah.
So just accept the fact. When you're mayor, it's the end of the line because you're going to make so many enemies along the way. You're too exposed. As you pointed out, the media is with you morning, noon, and night. They see you warts and all. It's over. Just cash in your chips. And that's the promise that I make. If you go to sliwafornyc.com, at sliwafornyc.com, I promise you, you elect me mayor. That's it. I'm not going anywhere else politically. You see that? That's one promise I can keep, David Paterson, because no mayor ever has.
The previous announcement was sponsored by Sliwa for Mayor. For more information, go to sliwaformayor.com. Well, that was really quite a performance, I must say. But all true. And I just think there's something about the duty of being mayor of the city of New York that might be second only to being president. That's why I think, because the president can't run for anything higher, although maybe the current president might try.
Well, now, you said the second, and I would agree with you that was that way a long time. It's second toughest job in America until de Blasio took it, the part-time mayor. I mean, this guy, you no longer hear that it's the second toughest job in America.
No.
Because of the way de Blasio created, while I'm in at City Hall at about 12, I take a nap downstairs at 1. I'm finished up at 8. I don't really go out to events at night. And I just go home with Charlene and hang out on the back porch of Gracie Mansion.
And read a different manifesto.
Yeah, well, they liked a little bit of that herb. You know what I'm saying? Hey, it's legal now. Recreational use of marijuana is legal now. Not because of de Blasio, actually because of Andrew Cuomo. The best debate would be if the old Andrew Cuomo would be on a stage and debate the new Andrew Cuomo. It would be like a scene out of Seinfeld where you have George Costanza,
Sure.
The George Costanza of politics now is Andrew Cuomo. Everything he was for before, he's against now. Every day it's something else. I was opposed to the increase in the minimum wage. Now I'm for it. I was for tier 6. Oh, tier 6. We don't need to follow that. On and on and on. Everything that he was for, he's now against.
Well, you know, Curtis, one of the things, many times when someone's going to change a position, what they do is they change the position and act like they never had the position in the first place, as opposed to just getting in front of a camera and saying, listen, you know, I've been with this issue for a number of years, but the statistics now show that it's not working. And I would be remiss if I didn't make changes to try to ameliorate that situation. And I am now, you know, for whatever it is. But it's the ones who think it's almost as if they don't believe there's something known as cameras and recording devices and television stations, because all you have to do is flip back and you can, and I can't remember who it was, but one of the networks once put this candidate, I'm just not remembering who it was, but they had him saying one thing and then they had him saying another thing.
Well, that's what, wait, you just ripped off one of my TV ads against Cuomo. If he survives the democratic process, I'll say, which Cuomo are you voting for?
Right, exactly.
The Cuomo for no cash bail, the Cuomo for raise the age, the Cuomo, all the things that have destroyed our state. Now he's saying, oh, but I'm going to be the law and order guy. I'm opposed to that. Congestion pricing, he brought it in. I'm opposed to that now. I think he thinks that people are stupid. He's banking on that they don't remember what he did and had the power to do. And I guarantee this, because I know, Andrew Cuomo, you're watching. Even though I don't have jurisdiction, I'm going to team up with Mike Lawler, and we're going to remove that name from that Tappan Zee Bridge one way or the other. The Mario Cuomo Bridge. Come on. It's time to return it to its roots, the Tappan Zee Bridge. They never named a bridge after your father, Basil Paterson, did they?
No, they didn't. Maybe that's what we'll name it when we remove it.
Well, I would more prefer that, because I don't know. Well, Mario Cuomo was a good baseball player. So
Yes.
I don't know if he was a good stickball player. I'm assuming he was. But I got to say, and ladies and gentlemen, I know, having played against David Paterson's father in stickball, top shelf 5-star, truly the all-star who is in the Stickball Hall of Fame. I was the commissioner for 12 years. I got Bupkis. His father's in the Stickball Hall of Fame.
Well, does the commission still exist?
Yes, it does. You would think, right? Look, mayoral candidate who promotes stickball, I would be considered worthy? No. According to them, I was $1 short and a day late in terms of my own stickball prowess. According to them, Curtis, I knew Basil Paterson in stickball. You're no Basil Paterson. Just go to Sliwa for NYC.com, huh?
Oh, I knew Jack Kennedy. You're no Jack Kennedy.
That's right.
It's one of the great lines of political debates. Well, folks, we hope you have enjoyed this segment and session of the left versus the right. Curtis Sliwa will be in the field next week, so you'll have to put up with me either talking to myself or someone else. And one of the things that we really like is that we are not only having this program every week, but it gives us a chance to follow some of the candidates or some of the people who are trying to get things done in the city and see how far they've gone and what they're up to. So thank you all for the time. Thank you for listening. You'll hear from John Sterling, the voice of the Yankees, and you won't have to listen to me until next week. This is David Paterson, along with Curtis Sliwa, signing off. Thanks for listening.